news to you I'll tell how the good old Union has come in here to dwell.
The largest union talk radio program in the South. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. If you've got anything to add, folks, we don't have any guests on the program today, so give us a call. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. We've got a lot of good stuff for you today. During the first 30 minutes, we're going to be talking about some Alabama-heavy stories because Alabama's the only place that we are on the radio during the first 30 minutes. Then we're going to talk about some other broader stories. But the first one is, one of the biggest stories in Alabama politically right now is that former U.S. Senator Doug Jones is going to be running for governor. Doug Jones won election to the U.S. Senate in 2017, defeating Roy Moore. And so because he has been a U.S. Senator for Alabama in the not too distant past, there is a lot of excitement, among the Democratic, liberal chattering class in the state of Alabama. And, there's... It's really difficult for me to get excited about it for a few reasons. I mean, for one, it is really difficult to imagine Doug Jones winning. That is a difficult thing for me to see. I do want to recognize the terrain is a little bit different than it was in 2020. 2020 was a year where things were pretty close. I think Alabama actually trended a little bit more Republican than it had even in 2016. So, it wasn't the best environment to be running as, and it was in a general election year with the presidency on the ballot. And so, the turnout is big, and when turnout is really, really big in Alabama, the election tends to go more Republican. And so, the turnout was as big as it gets. Even then, only 64% of people vote. Only 64% of registered voters actually come out and vote. And so 2026 is going to be a better year to run as a Democrat than 2020 for a few reasons. For one, it's not a presidential election year. Right, and so you're not going to have that big turnout. And with somebody like Doug Jones, maybe you're able to excite the Democratic electorate a little bit more because they feel like there's a better chance with somebody like him at the top of the ballot. So the turnout is going to be lower. Maybe Doug Jones is going to be able to generate some excitement. And also it will be in the middle of Trump's second term, where he has really very, very quickly eliminated a lot of his goodwill that he got. At the beginning of his second administration, there was a huge sort of culture shift that was really palpable, and a lot of that is gone at this point. He is underwater on every policy issue, particularly with respect to the economy. I think even a majority of Republicans say that they disapprove of his job on the economy at this point. And also it is everything that has happened negative under the Trump administration has been due to his policies. Unlike unlike a lot of other administrations, and even in his first administration, where just frankly, not really that much happened. The Trump administration in his first administration, especially looking back now with part of his second administration in mind, he really ultimately did not do that much. He just did a tax cut for rich people, which was bad and it had negative effects, but ultimately the macro effect on the economy was just not that large. And now we've got these huge tariffs, which have increased prices a little bit, not as much as some people will want to say. He has done so poorly on the immigration issue that the immigration issue, which was the place where he was longest in the positive with respect to his approval rating, is now underwater. Most people at this point disapprove of what he's doing on immigration, which was his best issue. Most people disapprove of what he's doing on the economy. The immigration issue is all him. People are reacting to their lying eyes, as, Republicans would want to say. I mean, it's just ultimately you're reacting to what you're seeing, and people don't like it. They don't like that prices, not only have prices not gone down, which was really, never really in the cards, but inflation has actually increased relative to when Biden left office. Not by much, but it has increased. And, you look at what he's done to the federal government, people disapprove of that. And so, anyway, the Trump and Republican approval ratings are really, really low. And so this is just kind of a better environment generally to run as a Democrat. But it's very difficult for me to see Doug Jones winning, especially since, and it's very early, right? He's only been announced for a week, but it does not seem like he is interested in trying anything a little bit different than he did in 2017 or 2020. 2017, the only reason that he won is because Roy Moore tripped, right, and fumbled the ball. Or because he was just such a bad Republicans tripped and fumbled the ball by nominating Roy Moore. And so that's what's going to have to happen for him to win the governor's race. And that's why it's important to have a credible candidate in all of these races, right? But it is, it's difficult for me to see him winning. I don't see him, doing much introspection about what could I have done differently to win? How am I going to treat this race differently? I just don't see much of that. I do not see much of that. And, and then separately from, can I get excited because I can believe that he's going to win? No, I can't. It's difficult for me to get there. Then there's a second order question of, okay, well, what can his campaign do to improve the terrain for pro-working class politics in the state of Alabama, whether or not he occupies the governor's mansion in January, right? That's a second question. And on that, I am still not. It's still difficult for me to get excited about it because I was reading an article this week. He spent $30 million in 2020. $30 million. And, the terrain is exactly the same in the state of Alabama as it was in 2020. Like, there is nothing different. There was none of that $30 million, as far as I can tell. And, look, I'm local to Huntsville. I'm local to North Alabama. And so, my vision is limited. Okay. I recognize that. And so if somebody has inside information or somebody has visibility on a project that I'm not aware of, feel free to call in 844-899-TVLR. But I don't see anything that Doug Jones has, that the Doug Jones campaign invested in, that has continued to build power or to make the conditions more favorable for pro-working class outcomes, right? I just don't see that. And, at one point I heard him talking about how he was, when he was in the Senate, and this is true, you can go and look it up, he was the most bipartisan senator. There was no other senator during his tenure in the Senate, there was no other senator, Democratic senator, that voted more with Republicans than Doug Jones. And he was like, and it still wasn't good enough. And like that, to me, what that says is that, voting with Republicans as a Democrat is not going to get you a lot of Republican votes. Because if I'm a Republican voter, if I'm a conservative voter, I'm going to just vote for the real McCoy, right? You got to offer, it seems to me, what do I know? But it seems to me that you got to offer something really different not I'm a midway point between these people that you absolutely hate on the left and these people that, you kind of like, or some of the people that you really like on the right. I'm a midway point. Nobody, there's not a constituency for that, except, on, Wall Street and, in the business lobby and stuff like that. But outside of there's just not a constituency for that. You have to offer something different. And does that mean that Doug Jones should run as like an AOC or Zoran Mamdani in Alabama? I think there are things that he can learn from their campaigns, but obviously not, right? I mean, AOC, Zoran Mamdani would get absolutely clobbered in the state of Alabama. I have no illusions about that, right? So I'm not saying that he should run like that, but here is a candidate that I think he could learn from, Dan Osborne. Dan Osborne ran as an independent for U.S. Senate in Nebraska and ran 14 points ahead of Kamala Harris. Doug Jones ran in 2020. He got basically the same as Joe Biden did, right? So he was kind of just basically generic Democrat. Dan Osborne way overperformed Democrats. I mean, Sherrod Brown in Ohio, he overperformed Kamala Harris by like 7 or 8 points, right? So there are, lots of similarities between Ohio, Nebraska, and Alabama. And so there are a lot more things that I think that you could take from Sherrod Brown or Dan Osborne to make to make the race more interesting in the state of Alabama. And I just don't see evidence that Doug Jones is kind of like taking those races into consideration, because he's still talking about, I was one of the most conservative Democrats in the Senate. And so it's like, well, who's that for? Who is that? I don't know. Who's that for? It's not for me. It's certainly not for me, right? But again, I know I don't have illusions that I am the median voter in the state of Alabama. But is that politics for the median voter in the state of Alabama? My humble analysis is that no, it's not. Is that no, the median voter in the state of Alabama is not actually interested in, what is your percentage of voting with respect to Republicans and Democrats? Do you vote 50% with Republicans, 15% with Democrats? No. What my kind of conception of the median voter in the state of Alabama is they want to be able to identify with you in a real, visceral way and believe that you are fighting for them and for the things that occupy, bandwidth in their mind. And for a lot of them, that is unfortunately, in my view, on issues of like immigration and LGBT issues, and they want to see that you're fighting, against immigration. They want to see that you're fighting against LGBT issues, and so but obviously, I don't think that I could not be their fighter on those issues. And so how can I be their fighter in other ways? In what other ways can you appeal to people that you disagree with socially? I think that for one, you can approach them in a way that they don't believe that you're looking down on them in the social setting, and then you can fight for them on economic grounds. And the kitchen table issues is something that conservative Democrats have always kind of talked about. And he is talking about that in his campaign. He's talking about how Alabamians can't afford groceries, can't afford housing, can't afford health care, et cetera, et cetera. He doesn't have any policy platforms on his campaign website yet, which is fine. It's only been like 3 days, right, since he's announced, and so fine, whatever. But the only policies that he is talking about so far in his interviews, in his public in his public things that he's been talking about, has been, one, the overtime tax cut that Democrats in the state of Alabama pushed forward and were able to win, and then Republicans rolled back. And now Trump has adopted it as a policy nationwide, and a lottery. Well, Democrats have been running on a lottery for 40 years in the state of Alabama? They haven't won for the last 40 years running on a lottery. What makes you think that they're going to win now, especially as actually, sports gambling has become a real big issue and has had a huge negative effect on young men nationwide. That's not to say that I would oppose a lottery. I still think that we should do a lottery, but the terrain is a little bit different because gambling now has had a serious negative effect on people's lives across the country. And so is it even as good of a policy as it was when Walt Maddox ran on a lottery 8 years ago? I think probably not. And then the overtime tax cut. That helps a very small subset of people and they like it, but that's not, ultimately, for the vast majority of Alabamians, an overtime tax cut is not going to help them afford health care, housing, or groceries. And so what else do you have to offer? What else are you going to be pushing for if you occupy the governor's mansion? Those are real questions. How do you get people excited about you? How do you get people to believe that you are their champion? Overtime tax cut, a lottery is like, I don't know. So I've been rambling a little bit, but it's like, look, and the people, and there are going to be a lot of Doug Jones folks, or some of them, if they listen to this, they're going to say, well, they're going to disagree with me, and they're going to be excited about him, and think that I'm not seeing what they're seeing. So look, give me a call, 844-899-TVLR, and leave us a voicemail, or call in right now and let us know. Let us know what you think. Where am I missing? I'm always open to suggestions.
Yeah, I have a couple of things to add there. You talked about kind of running to the center and running as this bipartisan, moderate approach. And what I've found in Alabama elections is that if you're running as a Democrat, you are going to be portrayed as a baby-killing, woke communist.
Yeah.
And that's, irrespective of your record, right? Like, that's just how you're going to be labeled among a significant number of people, including people with a loud microphone. And so, I hear what you're saying, right? Like, is there really a distinct advantage in running to the center instead of, embracing more populist measures? Particularly, you talked about the economics, right? And you're right. Like, I hear folks like Doug Jones and many conservative Democrats, I've heard it my whole life about kitchen table issues. But that's not the same. Like, just saying kitchen table issues doesn't mean you actually have a program to address those issues.
Right.
And so there's always been that kind of disconnect. I think it doesn't resonate with folks because they're not really buying it. Because, basically the status quo with a few tweaks here and there, that's just not really sufficient for the vast majority of us, right? I mean, a couple of other things, that came up was, in terms of can he win, I think, someone pointed out in the comment section that one distinct difference in this election is that a lot of people are feeling pain. There's a lot of pain and disgruntlement out there. And I think historically, an election like 2026 certainly, seems to be a backlash election. It seems to be an election where Democrats do stand to gain a lot. Because historically, the party in charge is going to lose a lot of seats in an election like this, especially with these popularity numbers. Now, whether they take advantage of it is another question, and whether or not the candidates who may see some advantage there, whether they're worth a damn, is also another question. But I do think it's going to be tough because you can look 2017, that special election. It was a special election, for one thing, which means a very different electorate, a very smaller electorate. And Doug Jones was able to get super high turnout among the Democratic base, people of color, progressive whites, young people. And those folks turned out in very, very large numbers. And the Republican base turned out in very low numbers, right? So they had depressed turnout. That was not replicated in 2020. Whether it can be replicated in 2026, I don't know. It being a statewide election, historically, there is a lot less participation. In 2022, the last time we voted for governor, over 60% did not vote. So Kay Ivey won in a landslide, but realistically, only 1 in 4 Alabamians actually voted for her. So, you know, it looks a little different when you think about it that way, and that's not to say that all the non-voters are just like secret progressives waiting to be tapped. But I think the reality is there's a lot of poor and working class people who are not particularly engaged in politics. And I can kind of understand why, because most politicians aren't really speaking to us and they're not really advancing our interest. And, you know, I think folks can see that a lot of these politicians, and I'm not picking on any in particular, I mean, Alabama ranks at or near the bottom of everything good, right? We rank at or near the top of everything bad. By most metrics, Alabama is one of the worst places to be a working class person in the entire developed world. So the status quo is broken for vast majority of us here in the state. And I think most people recognize that. So I think most people get that. They know we're getting shafted. We know that big companies come down here to get the Alabama discount, and our politicians are in their pocket. And it's, you know, I think there's a demand for change and an opportunity for change. Whether we're going to see that with any of the candidates in 2026 here in Alabama, I don't know. You know, I try not to place a lot of hope in politicians or electoral politics, because looking back in history, people power is how we've won every inch of progress in this country. And, you know, I think that's what we need right now. We're facing many layers of crisis. We need people power, a mass, diverse, organized, working class movement like we haven't seen since the 30s and the 50s and 60s. You know, I think just voting for the right flavor of politician is not enough to address the imbalance of power between the wealthy elites and the rest of us. You know, elections are important. It is an area where we can express our people power and make an impact. And like I said, because of the nature of life here in Alabama, it's obvious that we, the people, are not getting anything close to what we need from our elected officials. I appreciate anyone who's willing to run for office and put themselves out there. I appreciate that there are some good folks working in that space, but let's also be honest that there are a lot of folks working in electoral politics who are slimy and who do not have our best interest in mind. And I mentioned, like I said, in 2022, over 60% didn't vote. And it didn't help that for a lot of us, the majority of the seats on the ballot weren't even contested. Right? We didn't even have the quantity of candidates we deserved, much less the quality. So the Southern status quo is broken for most of us, but it is working quite well for wealthy, powerful interests. And they rely on division and distraction to cover for their exploitation and extraction. We need candidates who are unapologetically of, by, and for the diverse working class majority. Candidates who will take on the powers that be and fight for a future we can truly believe in. So my challenge to any candidate seeking my support is how will you advance the interests of poor and working class folks, the everyday people? How does your campaign, from the platform to the methods to the funding, how does it relate to us, the working class majority? And if you do win, how do you plan to deliver for us, especially when the system is so stacked against us? So those are some of my thoughts. And again, give us a call. Let us know how you feel.
We do have a caller on the line. That caller is from a 256 area code. We'll go ahead and bring them on the air. Dwayne, it's good to hear from you again. Appreciate you calling in. What you got for us?
Hey, Jacob. Hey, Adam. First of all, I just want to mention Stacey Lee George is going to run as an independent candidate. We got to get signatures. Listen, the book, Let Stacey Lee George Do It, is just a regular, average, working person whose land got divided by the county, and he decided to run for office to do something about it. And I wrote the preface, so you should be interested in just since you know me, reading that. Going and reading the preface. Okay, now. But there's something else that's really important going on where the Valley Labor Report can make a very big difference this morning, right now. There are listeners in District 7 of Tennessee, and it is very important. Are you guys familiar with what I'm talking about?
Yes, there is a congressional candidate. There's a congressional race in Tennessee's District 7. It's a special election. The Democrats have nominated Afton Bain, a state representative from Nashville in Tennessee, to be their nominee. She is going up against Republican candidate Matt Van Epps. And supposedly the polls, this is a Republican plus 22 district. Trump won it by 22 points last year. And supposedly the polls have Representative Bain up, or not up, but only down by 2 or 3 points.
Very close. Very close.
Yeah, right. Yeah, 2 points. Now, and get this, guys, she was formerly a social worker, okay? Mm-hmm. She is for prison reform and helping the mentally challenged and all the things, most of the things that I would be for, Miss Bain is for, okay? So they are getting kind of worried. Do you know they're sending in J.D. Vance tomorrow to try to help Van Epps? Have you got me?
I knew that the Republicans were funneling millions of dollars into the district. I did not know that Vance was coming down.
Right. And listen, all of her donations are under $200, and they're individual people and along the lines of individual people, where theirs are the big money people. And so going just above Athens, I want to say there, you've got 2 counties that are in your listening range that can be hearing us right now, that can hear the importance of going and voting. And listen, it's more of the potential rural vote of the Tennesseans that she's likely to pick up, because the district got changed to make a balance between Nashville and the other areas. You got me there? Mm-hmm. Like a whole restructuring. So us talking about this right now and informing people and saying, get out to vote for Bain, okay, because that's going to change the structure of the House vote. Can you explain that to everyone? The Democrats will be 1 person closer in votes, which is very important. That's why so much money is getting spent on the Republican side.
Right.
That's right. They don't have many votes to lose, and they don't have, many strong majorities on certain issues, right? There's already enough signatures on a discharge petition for both Protect America's Workforce Act and the Epstein files, right, which we have already seen that going through. So, yeah, every race is going to be really important. I'm glad you mentioned that, because you're right. We do have some folks in Tennessee. Hope everybody is ready for the election and paying attention for sure. I know this is going to be Middle and West Tennessee. Yes, and listen, here's something you might want to research. HUD funding is going to end for a lot of major cities, and there will be people that become homeless, that they're setting up a place to either consider them drug addicts or mentally something wrong with them, to send them to what is potentially tents when they kick them out of their HUD because HUD is not being funded. Have you got me there? And remember what I told you about 3 months ago? The legislature made laws that you couldn't be walking on the state highway. The city of Montgomery made it where you can't even be homeless in their city limits, and something must be done. But if by the same token, from 140 to, I want to say, around 170,000 people minimum will become homeless this summer, when the big beautiful bill lets them do this. Look up what I'm saying. And listen, please let Stacey Lee George do it. It's a book. I wrote the preface. It tells about how he started. My first cousin was his dad that lost his legs, and a family member died and left him property. But the county laws made it where you couldn't divide the property, and it would become the county's instead of his inheritance. That's why he even got into politics and changed all of Morgan County, and wants to do that for the whole state by stopping nepotism and cronyism. And he would have team members. Guys, you could even suggest who you would want to be a team member to deal with the labor for me, and I guarantee you that person would be looked at to be a person on that committee. So this is beyond what the other two are talking about. This is actually action.
Yeah, Dwayne, we're gonna
appreciate it, guys.
Yeah, appreciate it. We're going to have to go to a break, but we'll definitely be having Stacey Lee George on at some point for sure. I can't imagine us not having him on sometime over the course of the election cycle. So, Dwayne, as always, appreciate the call. We're going to be going to a break here in just a second. We will be right back.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
Since 1889, the National Association of Letter Carriers has protected the rights of city carriers as they deliver the mail and offer support for their community. The Alabama State Association of Letter Carriers makes their legislative voices heard when it comes to issues involving the U.S. Postal Service and the working members of the union. The National Association of Letter Carriers has been longtime supporters of the Muscular Dystrophy Association and the Stamp Out Hunger Food Drive. This message is sponsored by the Alabama Association of Letter Carriers. To learn more, visit NALC.org. Unite Here is also a supporter of the Valley Labor Report. They are a labor union that represents 300,000 working people across Canada and the United States. Their members work in the hotel, gaming, food service, manufacturing, textile, distribution, laundry, transportation, and airport industries. You can learn more about Unite Here at unitehere.org.
Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
That's right, folks. From the mountains of Tennessee to the bayous of Louisiana, broadcasting online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studios in Huntsville, Alabama. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. Today on the program, we just finished a discussion about Doug Jones and a little bit of politics. We're going to be talking some about right-to-work laws and Mississippi firefighters winning their first collective bargaining agreement in 20 years. All that and more on today's program. If you want to be part of the show today, folks, we got a phone number and the line is open. That phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. We don't have any guests today, so we'll have a little bit more time for calls. So go ahead and get your call in. That's 844-899-TVLR. Feel free to ask us about anything. Talk to us about what we've been talking about, or ask us a question. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, you can find us anywhere you find anything online, in particular at our website, TVLR.fm, but we are also on YouTube, Facebook, and wherever you get your podcasts, all at the Valley Labor Report. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners, so if you want to become a sustaining donor to the program or make a one-time donation, you can go to tvlr.fm/donate or patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. We've got a bunch of cool merch for sale at tvlr.fm/store. And if you are a member of a union, then think about getting your local to sponsor the show. We could not do this program, seriously, without the support of organized labor. And we are coming up on the end of the year, so if you are a member of a union and your union is not sponsoring the show, you don't hear your union in the ads, then please do think about getting your local to sponsor the show. We're going to be doing the budget for next year here pretty soon, so we need all the help that we can get on that. So reach out to us at tvlr.fm/contact. And even if you hear your union's name in the ads, then they can always increase their sponsorship, right? Or another local can come on as a sponsor. So anything that you can do to help us keep this program on the air, keep this project afloat, we would appreciate it.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, because I understand times are tough and not everybody can chip in a few bucks, but if you can, absolutely do that. But certainly, if you're a member of a union, please do talk to your local, talk to your state or national or international union folks. Let them know that you listen to the Valley Labor Report. Let them know that you appreciate what we're trying to do and that you would like for them to support us. There's a lot of opportunities for us to grow. So I know we have listeners online who hear us outside of the Tennessee Valley and outside of Alabama. If you would like for us to be on the radio in your local market, hit us up, and if you can help us round up some sponsors, we would love to do that. We'd love to expand. We're on, I believe, 5 stations in 3 states these days, so we would love to expand that. I know there's college radio and other nonprofit, community radio stations that might even be willing to air us for free if they had some, local support. So definitely reach out to us on that. And I just want to add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. And we do want to welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, WGOW, Means TV, or through your favorite podcast app. We are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check that out. And as most of you know, we are not media professionals, just a few diehard unionists who want to amplify the voices of the working class here in the American South. We're hoping this project can make a difference on that front, and we cannot do it without you. So we want to thank everyone for tuning in, whether you're a loyal fan or a first-time listener today. We really appreciate you spending some time with us.
Absolutely. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us in the Facebook and YouTube chat. Joe, good morning. As always, thank you for tuning in. Infinite Content, Benjo, Quirky Geek Girl, Union Gus, Free American, TWY, 87. Thank you all for hanging out with us in the YouTube chat. Appreciate it.
And I saw the comment about Florida. That's interesting. Definitely feel free to, give us a call today or leave us a voicemail throughout the week and let us know a little bit more at 844-899-8857. And we love the reporting of McKenna Schuler down in Florida. She does a great job reporting on labor issues. So you may already be familiar with her work, but if not, definitely check that out. And that's a good reminder. Maybe we should reach out and have her on the show soon. Let us know what's going on down there in the interesting land of Florida.
Union Gus says that Turkey Day was avoiding any topics that matter with my dad. Fox News has started to eat his brain. Sigh. Yeah, I mean, I generally avoid politics with my family as well. It's just easier that way. I enjoy a good argument myself, which is probably symptomatic of like something wrong in my brain, and it's not necessarily that I'm like proud of it, but I enjoy kind of locking horns metaphorically, but I find that other people don't like that, and they can't handle like people disagreeing with them, and so
that's true. I don't mind a good debate, but yeah, a lot of people get real.
They get in
personal.
their feelings. Yeah,
they get real personal, or get their feelings hurt, or the people around you get really turned off, right? You and the other person may be into it, but the whole room is like,
you got to be able to break off if there's only two of y'all that are willing to engage in those fisticuffs. Quirky Geek Girl says about Doug Jones, he sounds like the old corporate Democrat, or am I reading his wiki wrong? Yeah, no, I mean, that's basically kind of it. Funny enough, when he was first elected, I was in college, and I was really active in the college Democrats. Father, forgive me for I have sinned. And I knocked on like hundreds of doors for him, and subsequent to that, one of the things that I was really upset about was he voted in favor of some banking deregulation. It overturned portions of Glass-Steagall, and I can't recall exactly what it did, but I was very upset about it, and so I actually had the UAH College Democrats, along with several other like Democratic and left-wing organizations across the state, sign an open letter to him, and it was published in AL.com. The Intercept interviewed us about it, and we eventually he did comment on it, and he just dismissed us and said, we don't know anything and blah blah blah, which is great. But to be fair to Doug Jones, He did some good stuff in there. He did not vote in favor of some abortion bans that came up that was a political stunt. He didn't vote in favor of Amy Coney Barrett, Trump's Supreme Court justice. He also had a labor liaison. I think he was the first U.S. senator from the state of Alabama to actually have a labor liaison to talk to have a direct connection to the labor movement and get an idea of what our issues were. But then on the other side, he also was not a co-sponsor to the PRO Act while he was in the Senate, and Richard Trumka actually made a special trip to the Alabama AFL-CIO convention to rip him apart for that. But then also, to be fair to Doug Jones, he was like, look, guys, if it comes up for a vote, I would vote for it, but I'm not going to co-sponsor it because it's not going to come up for a vote, and even if it did, it's not going to pass, and so what's the point? But then on the other side, it's like, what Republican voter in the state of Alabama was going to vote for Doug Jones but wouldn't if he would have co-sponsored the PRO Act? The answer to that question is zero, but the answer to the real, actually probably relevant question is what businesses or corporations or rich people maybe gave him $100,000 or something that wouldn't have given him that money if he had co-sponsored the PRO Act. Now, maybe there's something to that, but, I don't know. But so, he's kind of a garden variety Democrat, I think is the long and short of it.
Right. I mean, basically, you're being posed with a choice. Do you want a competent moderate or a drooling reactionary? I think is, and they're just banking on that being an easy enough choice for folks. And, well, we'll see. We'll see.
Didn't George, Free American asks if George started out as a Republican, Stacey Lee George running for governor as an independent. Yes, he started out as a Republican, but my understanding is that he was always sort of an outlier, I think.
Yeah, more of an independent-minded
He said, Free American may be more familiar with George than I am. He said he was a fighter in Morgan County and Republican bosses hated him. And then there was a question about gerrymandering in Alabama. Actually, Alabama, particularly as it relates to the Congress, I think the state legislature is a little bit worse, but the Congress in Alabama is not quite as gerrymandered as some other states. We have 7 seats, and 2 of them are Democratic, 5 of them are Republican, which comes kind of close to the states, how the state votes. It's like 28% Democrat in our U.S. House delegation, and they're like 35% of the state votes for Democrats. So it's pretty close. And if you added one more seat to the Democrats, Democrats would be overrepresented actually. So I think the U.S. House map is fair, more or less.
Yeah, there's I believe a state Senate district that's currently subject to some court rulings right now. So I think the state legislature map will be a little different, but we'll see.
We'll see. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number, 844-899-8857. Here's what workers in the U.S. South and the American colonies were up to from November 14th to the 25th. Due to the government having been shut down for more than a month, this is the first time that we have NLRB filings in a long time. So obviously we can't go everything on the radio because there was something like 40 plus NLRB filings, lots of elections, a big backlog we got to get through. So subscribe to the newsletter to get the very long list of new union campaigns and election results. 3,000 ground workers at JetBlue nationwide filed a petition with the National Mediation Board, because they're under the Railway Labor Act rather than the NLRA. They filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Association of Machinists. Amazon Transportation Operations Management Tom drivers in Shepherdsville, Kentucky announced they are unionizing with the Teamsters by marching on the boss. Organizing with Teamsters Local 89, the union says they are the first CDL workers to organize at Amazon. Big deal. 120 workers at Canfor Southern Pine in DeRidder, Louisiana filed a petition to hold a union election with the Carpenters, Local 301. 20 workers at Starbucks in Little Rock, Arkansas filed a petition to hold a union election with Starbucks Workers United, as did 24 at a location in Harrisonburg, Virginia. 25 workers at Spire Energy in Hattiesburg, Mississippi filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW, Local 605. 52 workers at Pine Hill Rehabilitation and Wellness in Birmingham, Alabama filed a petition to hold a union election with the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union, RWDSU. 244 workers at United Natural Foods, Inc. in Lancaster, Texas filed a petition to hold a union election with the Teamsters Local 745. 518 workers at Bering Straits Native Corporation in El Paso, Texas filed a petition to hold a union election with the Teamsters Local 745. And 150 workers at Heat Tech in Chattanooga, Tennessee filed a petition to hold a union election with the International Brotherhood of Boilermakers, IBB. In election results, 550 workers at Sanderson Farms in Hammond, Louisiana voted in favor of maintaining their unionization with the United Food and Commercial Workers, UFCW. There was a decertification drive there. 177 workers at M1 Support Services in Norfolk, Virginia voted in favor of unionization with the IAMAW. 250 security guards at Chenega Global Protection in Atlanta, Georgia voted in favor of unionization with the United Government Security Officers of America, Local 334. 21 workers at the BBC in Washington, D.C. voted in favor of unionization with the IBEW, Local 120. In strikes and bargaining updates, hundreds of workers unionized with the International Association of Machinists, IAM Local 2789, at John Deere in Augusta, Georgia, ratified a new 4-year union contract. The union says this is the strongest contract they've secured with the company in over 20 years and includes an 11% general wage increase, a $3,000 ratification bonus, more vacation days, no insurance premium increases, and more. Spirit Airlines is coming out of bankruptcy, and they are requesting that workers take it on the chin to help the company. The Airline Pilots Association, ALPA, which represents 3,000 pilots at the company, and the Association of Flight Attendants, AFA-CWA, which represents over 5,000 flight attendants at the company, have both tentatively agreed to temporary wage cuts. The pilots' hourly pay will be cut by 8%, and their retirement contributions will be cut from 16% to 8%. Their pay will be restored with a 4% raise in August of 2028 and another 4% raise in January 2029, and retirement contributions will also be restored in January 2029. The AFA-CWA has agreed to reduce overtime pay and eliminate ground holding pay, with the company saying that they will restore the original terms of the contract once they hit a 7% or higher pre-tax margin in 3 consecutive quarters. The company executives, to be fair, are also taking a pay cut to be no less than the pilots accept, although they did just hire a new CEO who got a $4 million bonus this month. So I would be upset about that. The agreements have to be ratified by the membership before they go into effect. The Recall Injustice campaign, made up of several Southern labor and environmental organizations, released a letter to Hyundai Kia calling on the company to negotiate a community benefits agreements with Southern communities to address issues such as child labor, prison labor, and low wages in their supply chain. Members of the coalition delivered the letter directly to executives at the LA Auto Show. Allegiant Air pilots, unionized with the Teamsters Local 2118, will hold a nationwide picket on November 18th at 10 a.m. local time to demand a fair contract and an end to negotiation delays. There will be 6 pickets in Florida. 135 workers at Refresco Beverage Company in Fort Worth, Texas, members of Teamsters Local 767, ratified a new 4-year contract that the union says contains substantial wage increases along with other improvements. 100 workers at MBM Logistics in Orlando, Florida, unionized with the Teamsters Local 385, ratified their first union contract. The Teamsters say the new contract includes a $5 an hour wage increase, fully employer-paid health care at no cost to employees, expanded vacation time, and 7 new paid holidays. Really cool. Firefighters in Jackson, Mississippi, secured their first collective bargaining agreement with the city in 20 years. The new contract contains major improvements, according to the union, and gives the union a say in new policies. 1,100 workers at CVS in Ohio, Indiana, and Kentucky, unionized with the UFCW Local 745, ratified a new 4-year union contract that the union says contains wage increases and safer working conditions. In political and legislative updates, after allowing the government to be shut down for over a month, creating enormous hardship for millions, the Trump administration suddenly announced that it would be unveiling a new health care plan that more or less did what the Democrats were asking for during the shutdown fight. Just as suddenly, the administration walked it back, but that seems to be the only proposal on the table right now, so we'll have to see what happens. Southern Business and Development magazine has said that 2025 has been the worst year for new project activity in the South since it started keeping track in the 80s for economic development activity. They say that deal activity in the region so far in 2025 is slower than any period during the COVID years of 2020 and 2021, as well as all years during the Great Recession from 2007 to 2010. For context, in the first 7 months of this year, only 171 total projects were announced in the South, meeting the Southern Business and Development magazine's threshold from January 1st, 2025 to August 1st, 2025. The average 7-month total over the last 30 years is 318.5. Significantly lower than the average, and so that article is really interesting. I would recommend folks read it. Mm-hmm. It has a lot of good context about. It's scary. The title of the article is Project activity in the South so far in 2025 has been so disastrous that totals are on track to mark the worst SB&D 100 in its 31-year history by a significant margin. Another thing they talk about in the article is how the South's economic development activity typically outpaces the other three regions of the United States by a significant amount. And so if the South is doing this bad, then the other regions are probably doing really bad as well. So really concerning stuff there.
Yeah, I don't even remember where I found that, but I'm so glad I did. Very stark numbers.
Yeah. The Trump administration is moving to reduce protections for entertainment workers under the Occupational Safety and Health Act. Specifically, they aim to exclude entertainment employers from OSHA's General Duty Clause, which is a catch-all provision covering work that does not have a specific standard yet, but for which dangers are recognized and preventable. OSHA estimates this will affect over 100,000 workers. The Economic Policy Institute says that if OSHA goes through with this deregulation will result in a significant increase in preventable injuries among workers and a decrease in employer accountability. Reuters details at least 470 individuals or organizations that have been retaliated against by the Trump administration, including hundreds of federal workers. Another report that I saw last week identified over 600 people who have been fired in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination for not giving him enough reverence. The Protect America's Workforce Act, which would restore collective bargaining rights for federal workers who had it stripped from them by executive order, hit 218 signatures on the discharge petition, forcing a vote on the legislation. It will likely pass the House, but it faces much longer odds in the Senate. Even if passed there, however, Trump would obviously not sign it. There is a provision to restore collective bargaining rights for DoD workers in the House-passed NDAA, but it's not present in the Senate version, so we'll have to see what comes out of the conference committee. Harris County, Texas commissioners passed a countywide worksite safety policy. One of the commissioners said that every year 100 workers die on construction sites in the county. The policy has a few different prongs, but what sticks out to me is that the prime contractors will be responsible for the safety of everyone on their work site and that workers have the authority to stop work if there is danger. If we missed something, let us know at tvlr.fm/contact or give us a call at 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. Adam, do you want to talk about, maybe let's talk about the Mississippi firefighters a little bit. We mentioned that during last week in Southern Labor, but this is a really exciting story that I wanted to spend a little bit more time on. You've been reading a little bit about this. Can you talk to us about what this means for the firefighters in Jackson, Mississippi?
Yeah, I saw this story this week and thought it was really interesting because it's been over 20 years since the firefighters in Jackson, Mississippi, that's Local 87 of the IAFF, it's been over 20 years since they've had a new collective bargaining agreement, which is pretty remarkable. Many listeners know that collective bargaining in the public sector here in the South is pretty hit and miss. It's pretty tenuous. A lot of states here in the South do not permit any sort of collective bargaining. It's more of a gray area in some areas or some states. There are, ways to accomplish similar goals through memorandums of understanding, an MOU or MOA, a memorandum of agreement. Some areas have meet and confer laws or policies where the employer must at least meet with the employee's representation to discuss new policies. So there's various ways it looks here in the South, but I thought it was really exciting to see a new contract in the public sector in the Deep South in Jackson. I'm from Mississippi originally, and so this was really exciting. And the IAFF did put out a news release on this, so I encourage folks, especially in the South, to check that out. They do credit, a change in city administration in part. for this. They backed State Senator John Horn in this year's mayoral race, and backed him with their PAC and their political program. And he took office this summer, and they leveraged that relationship to get a new contract. And so the new CBA protects leave and scheduling. It also formalizes Local 87's role in workplace decision making. General President Edward Kelly of IAFF said, "A contract lays the groundwork for fairness. That's not too much to ask when you're putting your life on the line." So really interesting that, there's a new fire chief as well. So he had been the Local 87 president before becoming the fire chief. So I'm sure that didn't hurt as well. They credit some changes in the city politics, being involved in city politics, and being able to use those relationships as being, giving some momentum towards this effort. They're hoping it's going to bring stability that will help keep trained firefighters in Jackson, which is the capital city over in Mississippi. And it's going to be there's going to be a new station as well, or a renovated station. There's going to be a brand new, nearly $1 million engine, as well as major renovations to a 46-year-old facility that's going to be taking care of years of deferred maintenance. Outdated apparatus had strained the department's ability to meet the needs of the community. And so the firefighters are real excited about that as well. Another win in this process. Horn, who is the new mayor, his father was an IBEW leader in Mississippi, and he's been a union member himself. So the mayor actually said, "I grew up understanding the value of a union and collective bargaining, making sure workers' rights are valued and protected. Jackson's firefighters are a group of honorable men and women, and we appreciate the fact that you're putting your lives on the line every day. The best way to recognize that," he said, "is to get as many good pieces of equipment, improved facilities, and working conditions as we can." So the agreement reflects the firefighters union's ongoing work to expand collective bargaining at the state and local levels. More than 7,000 members have gained a voice at work since the IAFF adapted its engagement strategy in 2023. So that's really cool to see this big win here in the South. A couple of thoughts I have about it. One would be, now that the firefighters have this contract, will they, extend a hand out to their brothers and sisters in other areas of the city workforce to try to help them get a collective bargaining agreement? Because what I've noticed a lot, and we've seen this in Florida, right, where firefighters are often, lumped in with the police, and those two groups are often excluded from attacks on public sector workers. And so, that divide and conquer approach has been very successful over the years. I know that, in a lot of areas, the firefighters are not members of their local labor council, or state labor federation. And so getting the firefighters union engaged in the broader labor movement and seeing themselves as part of the broader labor movement, that is a task, I think, and it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out in Mississippi. Does this CBA win for the firefighters boost labor organizing as a whole in the capital city there? So that's going to be interesting. And now that they have this foundation, can they keep it going even if the political winds change, right? It seems like they have an ally in the city hall right now, but that's certainly not guaranteed forever. So that will be interesting to see. But kudos to the union there for winning a what seems like a strong contract. They have a contract now where they did not have one for over 20 years, and that is a big deal. So I do want to applaud them, and like I said, encourage the firefighters union to take this victory and spread solidarity throughout the city and the state.
It is a really exciting thing. It's kind of interesting that they either didn't get, or they didn't try to get, or they weren't able to get a contract under the previous administration, because Chokwe Lumumba Jr., previous mayor of Jackson, Mississippi, he was at least, portrayed as a very progressive sort of person. And so
sure, yeah, and his father certainly was, but
I've never even heard of the current mayor, and so I don't know. It's you would think that I don't know. That was interesting to me. I wonder what the dynamics were there.
Right. But there could very well be a lot of politics, behind the scenes that we're not aware of and that we can't see simply from this news. Nevertheless, it's still an important accomplishment, right? And we need more public sector workers to have more rights, particularly here in the South. It's a shame that we have educators and firefighters and social workers and folks working in our parks and rec and in so many areas doing important work for our communities, and they don't even have a formal voice at work. They don't even have the rights and benefits that come with collective bargaining. And collective bargaining is not just a way to have better wages and benefits. It is, but it's also your voice, right? It's your way to actually have input over your work and know that the boss does on some level have to listen to you, right? They cannot just totally dismiss everything you have because when there's collective bargaining in place, by definition, there must be some negotiation from that other side.
Well, and seeing that the new CBA formalizes a role for the local union in workplace decision making was something that I really like to see as well.
Absolutely.
Because that's something that I think is really easy for people who are not, union partisans, maybe just rank and file firefighters. They don't, live and breathe unionism. That's something that's really easy to overlook, but is so important, and that's really the reason that I have been so convinced that unionism is so important and so vital and necessary to working class people, is that ability for workers to have a say in their workplace, in the place where you spend the majority of your waking life. Guess what? Here's a radical idea: you should have some say, at least some say, over what happens, over new policies. Your boss shouldn't be able to, just because they're your boss, change things, at the drop of a dime. I think that's bad. And so for this new CBA, and I don't know what it looks like, right? I would have to read the contract. Maybe it ultimately doesn't even amount to anything. You never know until you got to actually read the thing.
Then enforce the thing.
And then enforce the thing, right? That's a whole other thing. But having that a formalized role for the union to have a voice in new policies, in new decisions in the workplace is so important. So important.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's why a lot of times unions do fight for these sort of provisions, but sometimes not enough because you're right. It's tempting to just go all in on increasing the bottom line of your paycheck or the healthcare benefits or retirement contributions. But having that voice, that's a win that keeps, producing more wins, right? Because every time you have that opportunity to prevent a mistake, to prevent future issues and future grievances, right? Sometimes if you have that ability to sit down with management before they implement something, you can tell them, like, hey, you may not want to do that. That's going to piss off these people over here. Or, hey, have you thought about doing it a different way? Here's what we're hearing. There's opportunities, right? And so, it's unfortunate that so many companies take such an oppositional approach. Some public sector agencies do as well, unfortunately. But yeah, it's a big win there because ultimately labor unions are a tool and an instrument of democracy in the workplace, which, as you pointed out, is where we spend most of our time. It's where we create the value that powers this economy, right? Working people power this economy. We cannot have an economy. There will not be wealth unless we have workers doing the work that they do. And we deserve a voice in that. That's not asking too much. Unions allow us to come together and exercise our rights collectively. So kudos to the Jackson firefighters, and hopefully it will lead to more labor organizing and more wins, both in the public sector and in the private sector. Because chances are every one of those firefighters knows somebody who has a job that could benefit from a union.
Union Gus, listener in Portland, said the firefighters union here in Portland are consistently one of the most regressive unions in Portland. They consistently end up endorsing opposite the other unions. I wonder if that's just a thing here. No, it's not just a thing there. I think it's pretty common that the firefighters end up being one of the more conservative unions. I think for some reason that I'm not entirely, I'm not entirely sure, like, historically why this happened. This hasn't happened in other countries. If you look at France, my understanding is that the relationship between the firefighters and the cops is not the same as the firefighters and the cops here in the U.S. But in the U.S., it seems like firefighters and police officers and like EMS personnel really consider themselves part of the same category of workers as first responders, and so there's a real and the police tend to be the leaders of the first responders as like a political group, and so the firefighters, my observation is the firefighters kind of tail the police.
Which is unfortunate because I think a firefighter plays a different role in society and in the economy and in politics. I think a firefighter has much more in common with just rank and file working folks of any industry than they do with the police, frankly. Yeah. I think they have more in common with the teachers, with the custodians, cafeteria workers, and the other city and local government employees. I think that is unfortunate. And as I said earlier, a lot of politicians play that up as much as they can, right? Because it's
advantageous for them to cut off the firefighters from the other public sector workers, because the firefighters have so much. There's no song about screw the firefighters. No, everybody loves the firefighters, and so it's very politically advantageous to have the firefighters be more aligned politically with the police than they are with the sanitation workers.
That's right. And, there have been instances throughout history where, the firefighters went out on strike with other city employees. I know it happened here in Huntsville. City Councilman Bill Kling was telling us a little bit about that recently when we met with him, I think back in 1979. But I imagine that trend that we're describing has worsened in the 40, 50 years since that, right? Of firefighters kind of identifying with the police and the first responder, subclass, so to speak, being distinct and divided from the rest of working people.
We're going to take our final break of the first half of the program. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number, 844-899-8857 if you'd like to call in. Taking a break. We'll be right back. The Laborers International Union of North America, LIUNA, Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama local workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact April at our training center to start the process at 256-904-1753. No experience is needed. We offer free training, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is our mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power. The Valley Labor Report is also supported by the Communication Workers of America. Learn more at cwa-union.org.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by the United Automobile, Aerospace, and Agricultural Implement Workers of America, better known as the UAW. They are one of the largest and most diverse unions in North America, with members in virtually every sector of the economy. UAW-represented workplaces range from multinational corporations, small manufacturers, and state and local governments, to colleges and universities, hospitals, and private nonprofit organizations. The UAW has more than 400,000 active members and more than 580,000 retired members in the United States, Canada, and Puerto Rico. You can learn more about the UAW and join at uaw.org. The Valley Labor Report is also sponsored by Labor Notes. Labor Notes is a media and organizing project that has been the voice of union activists who want to put the movement back in the labor movement since 1979. You can learn more about Labor Notes at labornotes.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
Union leaders, do you want a powerful website and mobile app built just for your members? The Union Active system, created by Unions America, makes it easy to share news and documents, send alerts, and keep your members engaged anytime, anywhere. Trusted by thousands of unions, Union Active streamlines communication so you can focus on what matters most, your members. With real-time updates, secure messaging, and custom features built for unions, you'll keep your members informed and engaged 24/7. Get Union Active today. Visit unionactive.com to learn more. Union Active, the ultimate website and communication system for unions.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth. All wealth should go to labor. You are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morris, and my co-host is Adam Keller. We appreciate you tuning in. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. We had a really insightful comment, I think, from Free American. We were discussing, what do you call it? The historical contingency about police and firefighters being so sort of simpatico politically. And he said that police and firefighters operate in high-risk, high-responsibility roles that emphasize discipline, hierarchy, and public safety. Adam in the break also added machismo. And I think there is a lot to that, I think. Probably worth noting that, the high responsibility aspect of it for individual police is probably the perception of that is a lot higher than the reality because of things like qualified immunity. But nevertheless, I think that was an insightful comment. Union Gus says behind the
we can say
B
bastards.
word. Do what?
We can say that.
You can say that on the radio. Behind the Bastards did an episode on the first cop union and its origins here in Portland, and they were helped into existence by Fire, who wanted to build pressure on the city to get a better contract. Now cop unions are a blight on local politics nationwide. Yeah, there's something to be, I don't know. You gotta have some sort of law enforcement officers, right? And I don't know how to set that up in a way that you don't have a situation where the police, I don't know. But obviously the way that we have set it up and the way that we train police in this country has been problematic, and it has created a view among police that their job is less about being public servants and more about patrolling an enemy population. And so, how do you have, but you got to have law enforcement somehow. You got to have public safety, and in some cases, the people who are charged with public safety are going to have to be violent, and in some cases, they may have to use lethal force. And so, how do you gotta do better about instilling an ethic of community service and self-sacrifice over this warrior ethos, because it's been bad, obviously.
Well, and I think it's also worth noting that the laws themselves that they are charged to enforce are not good in many cases, right? That is part of the problem, is politicians pass things like the war on drugs and then unleash the police to go after poor Black and brown communities. And so,
well, and I mean,
the politicians have some responsibility there too.
Absolutely. And one of the things, and the politicians, and even to a certain extent, the public, Zoran Mamdani in New York City has been talking about this, about how, we have burdened police officers with not just being police officers. Now they've got to be social workers. They've got to be homeless people. They've got to deal with the homeless problem. They've got to deal with addiction problems. They've got to deal with all of society's problems. We are putting on police rather than addressing them in other more fruitful ways, and we are just using the punitive aspects of the state to deal with a lot of these social problems in ways that do pit police against the population in ways that are probably less than productive. Mark in the chat asked what laws aren't good, and we named some. I mean, the war on drugs has had very negative outcomes, and there's
the war on drugs has done more harm than drugs.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sorry, but if you don't believe that, you need to do a little more research.
Which is not even to say necessarily that all drugs should be legalized. I think probably
it's just you look at how it has been enforced in a discriminatory manner. You look at how it's been disruptive to so many communities, how many people are suffering in cages because they had an addiction problem, because they had a health problem, and they did not get health treatment. They got punishment, they got incarceration, and in some cases worse than that.
Right. In some cases, death. Yeah, because they're being sent to prisons in the state of Alabama that are so, the conditions are so bad they're unconstitutional, and so you've got people in Alabama's prisons who effectively receive a death sentence for using drugs. Right, and because they die in the prisons, and so that's not even to say that we got to legalize all drugs. We should probably legalize marijuana, but I don't think that we should. I think it would probably be bad if we legalized meth. But the answer is not legalize or throw people who use meth in prisons forever. There are other options for ensuring that, the use of meth is lower, and you got to treat it like a social problem, like a health problem, rather than, punishment, etc.
Right, and militarizing the police and deploying them.
And Mark, he asks how many people died of drug overdoses, presumably in the prisons, where we're saying that people who, are being effectively sentenced to death.
If the war on drugs is working, then why are there still so many overdoses?
Right.
Okay. Obviously, the approach of locking up people, beating people, ruining people's lives for their health problems, that's obviously not working so great if your end goal is to end the drug use and end the overdoses, right? Yeah. And other countries are doing better at this than we are. And it's a real shame, because you can look at the statistics and you can see that it's poor people. It's overwhelmingly Black and brown folks, but poor people especially, that are subject to these laws. Are you saying that rich people don't use drugs? As far as I can tell, rich people do use drugs. Yep. But they're not the ones who have SWAT coming into their neighborhoods. They're not the ones whose husbands and sons and nephews are being locked in the cage for the rest of their lives.
I mean, look at Elon Musk. I mean, he is zonked out of his mind all the time. He can even smoke weed live on air, and there's not even a thought in Texas, because he was in Austin, Texas on the Joe Rogan program smoking weed. To my knowledge, weed is not legal in Texas. But he doesn't even have a concern about, am I going to be arrested or not, because he's better than all of us, right? That's his view, and that's kind of the view of our laws. Okay, let's get to Boss Watch. We got a bunch of good Boss Watch stories. Just like with the NLRB, OSHA and the EEOC have been at least partially closed during the duration of the shutdown. So we've got a little bit of a backlog here. Over in Mississippi, Seward & Son Planting Company, a farming operation with 22,000 acres of corn, soybean, and cotton in Louise, Mississippi, will pay $150,000 and implement policy changes via a 3-year consent decree to settle a race and national discrimination lawsuit filed by the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. According to the lawsuit, starting on December 1st, 2020, Seward & Son began hiring immigrant agricultural workers from a foreign country to supplement its existing workforce, which consisted primarily of black farm workers of American national origin. The EEOC alleges that Seward & Son discriminated against its American workers by providing the foreign workers with preferential job assignments, which were less strenuous and had more work hours, higher pay, and higher bonuses. In addition to monetary damages for the class of black American farm laborers, the decree requires that Seward & Son review, revise as necessary, and disseminate its anti-discrimination policy, instructing employees about their rights and how to report discrimination or retaliation. The decree also requires Seward & Son to annually train its managers and employees on discrimination and retaliation, and provides other injunctive relief against the company to prevent such unlawful conduct in the future. Over in Louisiana, a U.S. Department of Labor investigation found a restaurant kept tips earned by workers in violation of federal wage law. Investigators with the department's Wage and Hour Division determined that the owners of the restaurant Chopsticks Buffet kept all tips intended for their employees that were paid by credit card in violation of federal tip pooling provisions. The investigation recovered $81,000 in tips for 12 workers. Additionally, one employee was paid only in tips and denied $1,400 in earned minimum wages. The department also assessed $1,188 in civil money penalties. The law does not allow owners and managers to keep tips given by customers to service employees, said Wage and Hour Division Director Troy Moulton in New Orleans. Tips belong to service workers. Employers that allow managers and owners to receive portions of those tips can face investigations or litigation. The Wage and Hour Division is available to provide compliance assistance to help employers understand their obligations to tipped employees. This segment of Boss Watch, Union Busters, covers national updates. It's sponsored by Labor Lab. Labor Lab is an employer watchdog organization. They are committed to safeguarding the right to organize through unions, collective bargaining, and mutual aid. They do this by combing through reports that Union Busters are required to file with the U.S. Department of Labor. There were no new filings from last week, so we're going to go over a little bit about the role of these filings and some of the Union Busters' tactics. So the filing is called an LM-20. And those forms provide essential transparency into employer consultant agreements aimed at influencing employees' decisions regarding union representation. The U.S. Department of Labor mandates these disclosures to ensure workers are aware when outside parties are involved in their workplace's labor discussions. Information that can significantly affect how employees evaluate an anti-union message. Unfortunately, the labor relations industry's compliance with these transparency rules are so low and enforcement needs significant improvement. Consultants are required to file the LM-20 within 30 days of entering into an agreement, but late and non-filing remains a pervasive issue that undermines the law's goal of informed worker choice. The way that these anti-union persuaders operate can significantly impact the outcome of unionization drives. Labor Lab says that these consultants are highly compensated and employ a range of tactics to thwart union organizing efforts, often involving manipulation and intimidation. Workers should be aware that the high rates paid to these consultants come directly from the employer's budget, demonstrating a significant investment in discouraging union activity. Some common tactics include disseminating false and misleading information, employing intimidation tactics like captive audience meetings, engaging in surveillance, and conducting one-on-one meetings. The disclosure of the employer-consultant relationship is the right of every worker, so workers need to be on the lookout for this kind of thing and report any suspected persuader activity to the U.S. Department of Labor's Office of Labor Management Standards. You can reach them via olms-public@dol.gov by calling 202-693-0123, and if you need any assistance with that, you can contact Labor Lab at contact@laborlab.us. That's going to be it for the first half of this program. We appreciate everybody listening. We got a great second half of the show lined up for you. We're going to be responding to an email that was left last week. We're going to be talking about Adam's experience in L.A. last week, harassing executives, not harassing, but being very nice to them. And we're also going to be talking about TDU endorsing Sean O'Brien. I thought that was really interesting that not only did they endorse him, but they endorsed him overwhelmingly. I think some interesting dynamics there that we're going to be breaking down and talking about, and would love your input on that. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number. You can find us on Facebook and YouTube at The Valley Labor Report to continue watching. If you don't, we appreciate your time, and we'll see you next week. All right, folks, we are off the radio now. Appreciate everybody hanging out with us. Like I said, we got a great second half of the program lined up. Give us a call. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR, 844-899-8857. We don't have any guests in the second half of the program, so feel free to call in. We're going to take a break, and we will be right back.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
This is Overtime, a production of the Valley Labor Report, the largest union talk radio and online news outfit in the South, coming to you from the heart of the Tennessee Valley in the Spice Radio studios in Huntsville, Alabama. We are run by working people and for working people in the South and all over the country. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We appreciate you spending some time with us. If you'd like to call in, the phone number is 844-899-8857. ZennyTube in the chat said, hell yeah, I'm 9 months sober and just got a UAW job. Congratulations, ZennyTube.
On both accounts,
we really need, on both accounts, I really got to get a soundboard so that I can have like an applause line. I'm so proud of you and happy for you. That's incredible on both counts. And
all that extra free time you have now, use it in the union. Get involved in the local.
That's right. Yes, congratulations. And thank you so much for being willing to share that with us. We really appreciate that. 844-899-8857 is the phone number. 844-899-TVLR. We had a voicemail that was left with us last week. We've been covering the GTA stuff, and so somebody saw a clip of us on TikTok, and they left this voicemail. Let's go ahead and play clip 1.
Yo, what's going on? I just came across y'all on TikTok, and I saw the Rockstar video talking about the alleged, well, not even alleged at this point, union busting on the part of Rockstar. Yes, I absolutely agree that they're union busting, especially because as soon as they fired them people, they released the statement saying that they were delaying the release of the game for a whole fucking year. So that should show you how crucial these 31 workers were if they had to delay the release of the game an extra 6 months. And the fact that the devs and other current staff are coming out in support of these folks, the fact that all of this, it just everything points. and I also have the same kind of predisposition to believe workers and be in support of them. So, I absolutely believe that not only are they union busting, but one of the striking workers said this, they're moving like some of the hated villains of the GTA franchise. These folks are moving like motherfucking Devin Weston. Okay, so we're not gonna have that. Thanks for doing this show. You're doing great work, and power to the workers, power to the people. Come on.
Appreciate the voicemail caller. If you want to get where he was, that phone number is 844-899-8857. That is 844-899-TVLR. There is one more update. We've been following the initial news was that GTA fired some 30 to 40 workers. They say for leaking company secrets. The workers and their union say for union organizing, and I think they're implicitly pointing to that the company is alleging these quote-unquote company secrets were in a group chat with union organizers, and so the people from the union being people outside of the company that were supposedly receiving company secrets. But at least in the United States, and none of these workers are in the United States. They're either in in Great Britain, in the UK, or Canada. At least in the United States, there is an affirmative right to discuss your working conditions, not only with union organizers, but with the public. You can be public about your working conditions. And to do that, you may have to talk about some things that would otherwise not be okay to share. But if it's necessary to explain your working conditions and your problems with your working conditions, then they can be discussed. And obviously, it's not like there have been any actual leaks of any GTA material. So we'll have to see what's going on. The update to that story was that GTA, subsequent to that, said that they're going to be delaying GTA for another 6 months Now it's a full year after the original release date. Is it directly related to those 30 or 40 people being fired? It's difficult to imagine that it has no relation. But of course, the company says there is no relation. Then there was another update after that the union had some protests. The union delivered a letter that was signed by lots of current employees. And now the latest update is that the International Alliance of Theatrical and Stage Employees in Toronto, Ontario, is standing in solidarity with the workers at Rockstar Games, and that they are providing legal support to the 3 workers recently terminated at the Oakville, Ontario studio. And in their statement, they say that creative workers across the entertainment industry deserve a fair voice on the job and the ability to advocate for themselves without fear of retaliation. As audiences continue to value the creativity and effort behind their favorite games, we will continue to support those who make the games possible. Workers seeking assistance or wishing to learn more about their rights to organize can contact IATSE at jsalter@iatse.net or at gameworkers.org. That's gameworkers.org. So, cool update there. Adam, you were in LA last week delivering a letter to the CEO of Kia about about the Recall Injustice campaign. The Recall Injustice, you can learn more at recallinjustice.org. It is a coalition of labor and environmental groups that are seeking to bring Hyundai Kia to the table to negotiate a community benefits agreement with Southern communities to address some of the problems in their supply chain. We have talked about some of the problems in their supply chain. We've talked about the new report from the Columbia Labor Lab about prison labor in Hyundai's supply chain. We have talked previously about reported instances of child labor in Hyundai's supply chain. And we have talked about, we talked about some of the things in that report. We are going to be talking to some of the organizers, some of the key strategists and experts in this campaign. I believe next week is when we're going to be talking to them a little bit more about those allegations and about the strategy to bring Hyundai and Kia to the table to negotiate a community benefits agreement. But Adam, you're a co-host of the Valley Labor Report, and you were really at the center of the action in LA last week. I mean, literally, you were the one delivering the message to the CEO of Kia, and then Brother Corey Springs from the IBEW in Montgomery actually physically handed them the letter. And so, you said that there were some funny things that happened while you were in LA, and some interesting anecdotes. So, outside, like I said, we're going to be talking a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of the campaign and a little bit about the specific allegations. But since we've got one of the people that was at the center of the action, I thought we could talk we could get a little bit of the funny inside baseball. So yeah, what was that experience like?
It was an amazing experience because, for one thing, I'd never been to LA. I'd never been to California. So that was new. It's the biggest city I've ever been in. So I definitely felt like a country bumpkin in the big city. But that was kind of fun. And, I was really, really impressed by the strength of our coalition and the collaboration from everyone. It was a team effort, and, it takes a lot of collaboration and teamwork to pull off a successful multi-day action, right? And so, we got to the LA Auto Show really early that Thursday morning, and it was super cold. That is one thing I did not expect. When I first learned I was going to be traveling to Los Angeles, I just sort of assumed it would be the normal Los Angeles weather, like maybe 75 and sunny or something. It turned out to be cold and rainy, at least for the first part of the trip. But, nevertheless, we got there, and, I I left my union jacket at home. I, tried to dress very business casual, look like I belong there. And we got to the Kia press conference, which was going to happen first, and went to the Kia press conference seats. Got some great seats on the first row. So great that I ended up actually sitting next to a row full of Kia executives, which was really a weird thing. Probably the richest people, most powerful people I've ever been around in real life, in the same room. So that was interesting. And they had their little car show exhibit, and brought out a new Kia Telluride and showed off all of its fancy new features. And I was I didn't know what a big deal the LA Auto Show really was until recently, but it is apparently a very, very big deal. I'm not a big car guy myself, but huge media presence from around the world. A lot of business and industry reporters, but all kinds of folks were there to see these brand new cars from all the major auto manufacturers. So we sat through the Kia press conference. The CEO and president of Kia North America, he does come out, gives his little spiel. And then they, conclude the press conference by doing some photo shoots. And so got up, real close to the photographers. As soon as they took their last photo, that was the opportunity to go speak to the CEO and just try to have a conversation at least. We didn't have much of a conversation. I was able to get out at least most of what I was trying to say before they called for security. But as you said, we were able to hand over a letter. So we do know that the, top echelon of leadership is very aware of what we're asking for, what we're concerned about. And that's really important because I think a lot of times big companies don't want to have conversations with the little people, the people that are affected by their companies. And so that was really important. Immediately afterwards was the Hyundai press conference. And it's worth noting that, Hyundai and Kia, they're distinct companies, but they're both affiliates of the Hyundai Motor Group. They operate within the same corporate conglomerate structure. Their supply chains significantly overlap. So that's why the campaign is Recall and Justice at Hyundai Kia. So the Hyundai press conference took place immediately after the Kia press conference. As we are being escorted out, we heard security call for extra backup at the Hyundai press conference, so we knew it may go a little different than my experience. Something else that was interesting was that, after presenting the letter, a couple of folks held up signs that said Recall and Justice at Hyundai Kia, had a QR code, and they really hated those signs. Let me tell you, they got really pissed about that and sent about 24 security, it felt like, to come swarm after us. And, it was kind of funny. For several minutes, one of my colleagues was there holding up the sign. They would get in front of him and try to block him. He would just turn the other direction and keep slowly walking the other direction until they got in front of him then, and he would turn around and go the other direction. And this went on for a few minutes, and that was pretty amusing and hilarious to see. And so the Hyundai press conference takes place. We're outside being walked to the street. And my buddy who had a similar role as me, he stands up to speak, and he was physically grabbed by the shirt collar by some corporate person, not a security person at the convention center, but some corporate person, grabbed his shirt collar, said, "Oh, no, you don't," as soon as he started talking. And so they started, manhandling him out of the press conference. However, a letter was delivered to Hyundai executives, so they did receive it. And so, funny enough, he ended up blending back into the crowd and wasn't even actually kicked out. So he was able to go back later that afternoon and talk to people and check out the cool cars. He just changed his hat and went back and, saw the sights. Most of us, we were ID'd and banned, but, the interesting thing is that the very next day we held a more public facing action, and so we held a march, and we marched a block or two to the convention center where the LA Auto Show was being held. We had a rally, had several speakers talk about the impact of their practices, some of the issues that you mentioned earlier, as well as real serious safety concerns and violations, environmental violations as well. It was kind of a dick move for the convention center folks to turn the music up all the way to try to drown out the rally. But, that kind of thing happens. It's to be expected. So we were out here talking about these serious issues as Bee Gees, Staying Alive was blaring at full volume. So that was kind of, a sight to behold and to hear, something interesting. But the action went well. We did talk to quite a few reporters throughout this process, which was really good. And we did make Korean news, Korea Daily, I believe it was, put out information about the protests and about our actions and about the Recall Injustice campaign. So it was a successful action, and really it was the public launch of a campaign. So what's next is going to be largely in some ways up to the companies as to whether or not they're willing to listen. I think they should, because they have an opportunity here to be on the right side of history. They have the opportunity to go down in the record books as supporting human rights and really salvage their reputation. There are successful community benefits agreements that have been in place in other areas, including here in Alabama, right? New Flyer is a clean bus manufacturer, has over 500 workers. They sell clean buses to big, metros, and they have a community benefits agreement. And they've had one in place for years now, and it's been really successful on all accounts. The business is still successful, it's still profitable, but in the meanwhile, they have actually made real commitments to the community and to the workers. And there's been an ability and a process to hold folks accountable on each side and follow through with those commitments. And so it's a much more diverse workforce, better trained workforce, better represented workforce. And so, we'll see how Hyundai Kia responds. I'm sure they were not happy to be in the Korean news, but ultimately they have to take accountability for their actions and the actions of their supply chain and their partners and subsidiaries. We don't have to do things the way we've been doing them in Alabama. I get it. These big companies, they come to Alabama in the South for a reason. It's not because they love our sweet tea and biscuits, right? It's because they come down here hoping to get the Alabama discount. They're hoping to pay our workers less, treat them worse, give them less benefits, right? They're hoping they can get away with rampant union busting. They know the politicians are going to be very, very favorable to them. They know they're not going to have to worry much about environmental regulations, or any kind of laws that may, put up guardrails to their activities, right? We've been talking about laws this morning on the show, and people in the chat who, are big on laws being applied to poor and working class people. But, there's just not a lot of legal regulation here in the South of these big companies. And so even where there is regulation, often it's, a slap on the wrist if they get caught. My understanding is that over 10 people have died working for Hyundai Kia in the supply chain in the last decade. There have been many, many injuries. Again, you can go to recallinjustice.org and check that out. It's an interactive website, and you can browse for yourself some of the things that have been found there. But we just don't have to accept this kind of stuff. I don't think workers in Alabama deserve any less than workers anywhere else, right? Why do we deserve less benefits, less rights, worse treatment, lower wages, a more polluted community? No, we don't deserve any of that. And so I think it's totally possible for these big companies to hear out the concerns of the community and to negotiate a community benefits agreement that can actually fix some of these issues and build a better future for everybody involved.
Appreciate that, Adam, and appreciate you spending the time to do that. I know that was a big commitment to take basically almost a whole week dedicated.
And
to working on
no
that.
pressure, but I had to go first, right?
Yeah.
So that was the Kia one was first. So a little bit of pressure to make sure I got it right. But yeah, really, I want to again just shout out the whole team from the Recall and Justice Coalition. A lot of smart, talented people. A lot of people who are really dedicated to workers, who want to see things get better for working people in our communities and our environments where we live. We're not asking for anything crazy. We're just asking to do right.
Yep. Let's talk a little bit about. You want to do the TDU now, or you want to do right to work? Because this overtime will play tomorrow in Chattanooga. So do you want to do the right to work now, or do you want to save it for maybe next week?
Oh, I'm down either way. We can talk about right to work, I guess.
Let's talk about right to work, and then we'll talk about the TDU. So, Adam and I were talking yesterday, and because of the holiday, we didn't book any guests this week. And so we were thinking about what we wanted to talk about, and every now and then we'll try to do some segments that are a little bit more evergreen and a little bit more like less tied to the news. And we haven't talked about right to work laws in a minute, and I don't think that we've talked about right to work laws in our newest media market at all, Chattanooga, Tennessee, on WGOW. So it feels like a good time to talk about that. And so we'll start with talking about actually explaining what right to work laws are, because I find that there's all sorts of misconceptions about what it means to be a quote unquote right to work state. There are people that think being a right to work state means that your employer can fire you for any reason or no reason at all. That's not true. That is what that policy is at will employment, which is every state in the country except for, I think, Montana. I think Montana has some just cause protections in their law, and they're not an at-will state. But every other state in the country, except for maybe some individual industries, I think New York City just passed a just cause protection for fast food workers. But generally speaking, the default in the United States of America is at-will employment, which does mean that you can be fired for any reason or no reason at all, which is bad, I think. Any reason or no reason at all, unless it violates another law, right? So you still, even in at-will states, which are, again, basically every state in the country, even in at-will states, you can't be fired for discriminatory reasons. You can't be fired for reasons related to your union support, right? Supposedly, you can't be fired for it's illegal if that's done. But any other reason than illegal reason, or for no reason at all, you can be fired in at-will states. So if right to work is not at will, then what does it mean? Other people think that it means that it's illegal to unionize, that unions are actually illegal in right to work states. I've had people tell me that they thought that unions were illegal in the state of Alabama. That's also not true. The state of Alabama actually has the highest union density rate in the Southeast, double the density rate of Georgia. And so there are hundreds of thousands. There are millions of workers in the South, and the South is all right to work, I believe. I believe all states in the South are right to work states. There are millions of workers across the South that are in unions. So right to work can't mean that it's illegal to unionize. And so if it's not at will employment, it's not illegal to unionize. What does right to work mean? Right to work, all that it means is that the state intervenes in private contract negotiations between the employer and the workers who negotiate as the union, and says that employer and worker, you cannot agree to have what is called a union security clause in your contract. You cannot agree in a private negotiation to have a clause in the contract that says, as a condition of your employment in this establishment, you must either pay dues to the union or pay an agency fee, pay for the representation that the union provides. Even though the union, by federal law, is required to represent everybody in a workplace where they have where they've won a union election. If you're in the private sector, you win a union election, the union is then required by federal law to represent every single person, whether they're a member or not. Okay? That's the law. And despite that being the law, right to work states say that the union and the employer cannot agree to have a representation fee as a condition of employment. Despite the fact that employers can impose all sorts of other costs on their workers for the privilege of being employed. They can impose requirements such as uniforms without providing the uniforms. I had to do this when I was at a restaurant. I had to buy my own non-slip shoes to work in the restaurant. I had to buy my own black pants to work in the restaurant. I had to buy the restaurant branded t-shirts to work at the restaurant. That's crazy. So there's all sorts of other costs that employers can impose on workers. They can make you take tests and have you pay for the cost of taking a test. They can say that you have to have a car to work here. We will not provide you transportation. You have to either have your own car or you have to pay the bus fee. There's all sorts of costs. Maybe you have to pay for parking in the parking lot to work at your job. There's all sorts of costs that employers can impose upon their workers for the privilege of working at that corporation. But with respect to unions, the state, in right-to-work states, then comes in between the private negotiations of the union and the employer and says, this one particular fee cannot be imposed as a condition of employment. And so they will, proponents of right-to-work laws say that there are a few reasons for this. One reason that they say is because they say that it's important for the protection of freedom of speech. Because maybe you as an individual worker don't agree with your union on this, that, or the third thing, and so you should not be required as a condition of your employment to support the speech of the union. And well, there are two responses to that. One response to that is that the representation fees are the only things that can be legally imposed, and those have that is the percentage of the dues that go to non-political activities, right? So some portion of your dues don't go to political contributions to candidates, but they may go to lobbying efforts, and so that's considered political spending. And so the union calculates the percentage of dues that are spent on political things versus representation. And so the representation fee is the only thing that people can be forced to pay for in collective bargaining states. And but maybe you disagree with a bargaining position that the union takes, and so you shouldn't be forced to support that with your dollars. Well, that's silly, because the second response to the free speech argument is that the value that you create for your employer, which then goes into the employer's profits, can be used by the employer in any sort of way, any way that they want, right? I mean, Hobby Lobby spends millions of dollars a year on conservative politicians, donates millions of dollars to conservative politicians and conservative causes. All sorts of corporations make all sorts of political contributions, including utilities, right? And utilities are corporations that you have to pay to get electricity and water, right? I mean, in the state of Alabama, people outside of the TVA service area. You have to get your power basically from Alabama Power. And yet Alabama Power doesn't even have to calculate the percentage of the utility rates that people pay that goes to political contributions and say that, people who don't agree with our political program only have to pay a certain percentage of their utility bill so that they don't have to contribute to our political program. Why is that? Right? Why do I, as an Alabamian, have to contribute to Alabama Power's political program? Right? If representatives cared about free speech, they would be looking at all of these other ways that workers or consumers are forced to fund the political programs of employers, of bosses, of corporate entities, right? But they're not concerned about any of that because all that right to work is, the only reason that it's a policy that's law in so many states in this country, is to undermine worker power, right? Because there's no other organization. There's no other organization for which you have this specific carve-out other than unions, right? And so it is specifically to undermine worker power, specifically to make it so that unions have a more difficult time funding their operations, right? And so if you're in a quote-unquote right-to-work state, a union, even if it has 90% density, that's 10% less that they have to work with paying for lawyers to fight the bosses, with paying for organizers to bring in more people and increase their market share, right? It makes it more difficult to be a union. So that's all that right to work is. It's about undermining the union. And actually, if you look at the history of right to work, another thing that it was meant to do is it was meant to undermine racial solidarity and to undermine the campaign for racial equality. Some of the first arguments for right to work were not even about free speech or whatever. It was explicitly, we want to undermine unions because unions want to have a white woman and a black man in the same organization calling each other brother and sister. That is the formation of these right-to-work policies, right? And so, that's the whole thing. That's the whole thing. And Martin Luther King was a vociferous opponent of right-to-work laws. And I think one of his quotes is something like, right-to-work laws create no rights and no work. And yet, it's called a right-to-work law. Right-to-work laws don't give you a job guarantee. You would think the most, if you have a right to work, the most common interpretation of that, or the most intuitive interpretation of that, is that there is somewhere maybe a right to work facility that I can go to and say, I need a job, and I would be guaranteed a job. I would have a right to a job. But that's not even what right to work does, right? All that right to work does is undermine unions, because that is all that it has ever been meant to do. And so that is why right-to-work laws are bad. That's why the chambers of bosses, the councils of bosses, the chambers of commerce love right-to-work laws, because they want to undermine worker power. They want to increase corporate power. They want to increase business power. And so there you go.
Yeah.
If you have any questions about right-to-work laws, we would love to hear from you. The phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can leave us a voicemail, and we might respond to it on the next program. But one final thing, and then I want to, Adam, if there's anything else that I've left out, or any other context or color that you want to add to the conversation. But, I really want to emphasize the fact that right-to-work laws are an intervention in the free market, because what the free market would allow, if let's take a step back and pretend that the free market is a real thing. It's not, but let's pretend it is. If it were a real thing, it would allow union security clauses. It would allow unions and employers to have these clauses in contracts that both parties freely negotiate and assent to, right? Because in collective bargaining states, in non-right to work states, it is not actually the law that if workers decide to unionize, then they must contribute to the union. That's not actually the law. That's not actually the law. In collective bargaining states, in non-right to work states, the state, the government, just takes a step back from the negotiations and says that the union may ask for or may demand that this be in the contract. An employer may agree to it. It's allowed. It's not mandatory. It's not mandatory. You could have, if you are a union member in a non-right to work state and you feel very strongly for some bizarre reason that workers should be allowed to freeload off of the representation of their union without contributing anything at all to it, then you can argue for that and you can try to not have that clause in your contract, right? It's not a mandate in non-right to work states that you have union security clauses. It is simply allowed. The government does not intervene, right? And so having right to work laws is a government intervention in the free market, in private negotiations between two private parties. And it is put forward by people who in other cases pretend that they are for the free market and that, well, even if the free market doesn't have outcomes in this or that instance that you might find preferable, ultimately what the free market decides is okay, and on aggregate, it's going to be the best for everybody. And yet, in this instance where the free market, unmolested by government intrusion, would allow workers to have a little bit more power, these same free marketeers, these same conservative small government types come in and say, no, you must stop. And the government will force you to stop and disallow this. So right to work laws are big government laws, actually. They're government intrusion on private negotiations. So there you go. Adam, did I miss anything?
Well, yeah, Gus mentioned it in the chat, and you alluded to it as well, but I did want to just quote Dr. King here. In our glorious fight for civil rights, we must guard against being fooled by false slogans such as right to work. It is a law to rob us of our civil rights and job rights. Its purpose is to destroy labor unions and the freedom of collective bargaining by which unions have improved wages and working conditions of everyone. Wherever these laws have been passed, wages are lower, job opportunities are fewer, and there are no civil rights. We do not intend to let them do this to us. We demand this fraud be stopped. Our weapon is our vote. And that was Martin Luther King speaking about right to work in 1961. And you can look now at the map and you can see that right to work states, workers are worse off. Wages, benefits, working conditions, safety, across the board. Because when you hurt worker power, when you go after the unions, you ultimately make life worse for working people. The working people who create the tremendous value and profits in the economy.
Yep. So there you go. Yeah, and the mechanism by which that happens is that right to work states, unions are disempowered by having less dues money, have less representation fees, so it makes it more difficult to organize more people, and so their share of their market share is lower. And being in a union workplace, increases your wages, increases your wages, increases your benefits, makes your working conditions better.
It narrows
et cetera.
Racial and gender wage gaps. The more unions you have, it means more likely to have health care, right? More likely to have retirement, greater access to paid sick leave, right? So you're probably even going to have a healthier workforce. Yeah, it's wild.
Yep. All right. So there you go. Questions about right to work, give us a call, 844-899-TVLR, 844-899-8857. And if you leave us a voicemail, we'll respond to it next week. So let's talk about the TDU endorsing Sean O'Brien. This is an interesting story. Dan DiMaggio for Labor Notes has an article about the convention in Labor Notes, obviously, about the TDU convention. The TDU convention is where the TDU decided to endorse Sean O'Brien. And, the biggest tension that I have is obviously that Sean O'Brien has been, playing footsie with the Trump administration and tickling the balls of conservative types. And so that's obviously very frustrating, particularly to me, as an AFGE member. The types of people that he is palling around with are the types of people that are, destroying my union. And so that's very difficult to take. But I think the key tension here is what is substantive and material versus performative and theatrical. How do you weight those two things? Performative and theatrical movement, performative and theatrical moves don't have no, there's not no weight to those, right? Performative things, theatrics are important and they're valuable, but what value do you assign to it? And what value do you assign to other things like increasing strike pay? What value do you assign to things like supporting more organizing drives? And is there actually a balance there, right? And so the TDU did ultimately overwhelmingly back Sean O'Brien and Fred Zuckerman for re-election, and they did it really overwhelmingly. Dan DiMaggio says that the resolution received only a handful of no votes. There was a protest outside. Dan DiMaggio says about a dozen Teamsters and retirees held a protest urging TDU not to endorse his slate. But I was kind of surprised at how little how little dissension within TDU there seemed to be with respect to endorsing Sean O'Brien. And maybe that speaks to the fact that, the people who are most involved in the Teamsters, the people who care most about the Teamsters and are spending time day in and day out trying to organize new workers or trying to win new contracts, are so convinced that the Sean O'Brien presidency of the Teamsters has been a net positive, right? I am a union member first. I'm a union activist first over being an electoral activist because I think it's more important to organize workers and to build union power than it is to, spend time trying to get this or that person elected, right? And so does it make, can it be the case that Sean O'Brien, even while, tickling the balls of so many conservative figures who are doing so much harm to workers, ultimately that, him kind of filleting, what's his name, Vivek Ramaswamy on his podcast, like that action in and of itself ultimately did not produce harm for working people, right? Whereas on the other hand, him increasing the strike pay to $1,000 a week is huge, right? That materially increases, the likelihood that workers will strike and increases their leverage at the bargaining table. Dan DiMaggio in his article says that, strike pay is set lower by the Teamsters Constitution, but the International's Executive Board can approve higher strike benefits, and it has done so repeatedly, and it has encouraged locals to publicize that to give them more leverage with the employers. That alone is huge. And even if that was the only thing that was different, would that even be enough to say, like, okay, he's better than anybody else that would be there? Or certainly better than than any credible alternative, right? And so, DiMaggio talks in his article about a lot of the wins that TDU members say they are getting under Sean O'Brien's administration. He talks about the University of Minnesota, where workers there went on strike, and they were able to win. There was a nurse at a hospital that said the Teamsters won that union election there. It was the biggest private sector union organizing victory in decades. The local 135 in Indiana talked about how the new Teamsters leadership is giving members tools to build power. He said that strikes are back in the Teamsters. He talked about how Horseshoe Casino workers are on strike right now for union recognition. That's huge. He talked about how Zenith, and this is a huge one, Zenith workers with Teamsters Local 100, Zenith Logistics is a third-party operator for Kroger. They won a union election. They won a $5 an hour raise in year one with dramatic improvements in the healthcare plan, a doubling of personal days, and language that requires the employer to turn away ICE agents unless they have a judicial warrant, right? I mean, so Sean O'Brien just last week was photographed with DHS Secretary Kristi Noem. Okay? And that's like infuriating. That is infuriating that you would be seen publicly friendly with the woman who is behind all of this kind of stuff. All of these assaults on immigrants. That's infuriating, and particularly if I was an immigrant or if I had people that I were really close to that were being molested by this government, by DHS and by ICE, I would be livid that the person who is supposed to represent me is being friendly with this person. But ultimately, again, having a picture with Kristi Noem doesn't, like, that in and of itself isn't going out and harassing immigrants. And yet he clearly is content to allow locals to fight ICE if that is a priority for the local. Right? And so does that, I think even just this one contract, and it's not even the only one where Teamsters have been fighting ICE and been trying to get employers to have the authority to turn away ICE at their doors. Does even this one contract outweigh having a picture friendly with Kristi Noem? At least you must surely agree that there's an argument there. I can see it, right? Dan talks about the strike pay, and TDU steering committee member Frank Halstead of Local 572 said victories like Zenith never happened during the Hoffa administration. Companies like Zenith and Kroger were not afraid of a strike. Strikes were used as a threat to force bad contracts on members. Right? I mean, that's huge. Requiring the employer to turn away ICE agents in your contract is huge, I think. Right. And let's see, what are some other highlights? They talked about, they talked about TDU backing, backing people in the Teamsters Local 320 race. They talked about the Zoo Solidarity Campaign, which earlier this year organized members to vote down a contract. And with the support of TDU activists, Zoo Solidarity members signed up their coworkers on strike pledges and organized a Strike Ready rally, which pushed management to add 10% more in wage increases for the Zoo's 2,000 Teamsters. I mean, that's, how do you gotta, I can't be as infuriated with Sean O'Brien's, Republican apologia as some people are, just by virtue of the fact that I haven't been directly, I don't know, I'm an AFGE member. I have actually been kind of directly impacted by the Trump administration negatively economically. It has made my personal economic situation significantly worse. The Trump administration has. And so seeing him do that, seeing him be buddy with these types I receive it as an attack on me and my livelihood and my union sisters and brothers, right? But the reason that I'm a union activist instead of like a Democratic Party activist or even primarily like a DSA activist is because I believe that unions and worker power is like the key to building a better world. And if Sean O'Brien is turning the Teamsters into a militant union, into an organization that will fight for working people and build power, win good contracts, win new contracts, organize new workers, then, I can understand the argument that, okay, fine. Even as long as he keeps doing that, I'm fine with him being weird about Republicans. That is at least where the TDU activists seem to have landed. I thought this was interesting. Dan writes, inside the convention, a few longtime TDU members voiced opposition to an endorsement of O'Brien. Sean O'Brien is giving material aid and verbal aid and assistance to people who have put this country in crisis, said John Zura, a UPS driver from Chicago, Local 705. No one is going to tell him to change course besides TDU. Zura urged TDUers to speak up and renegotiate the terms of the coalition with O'Brien. It's about signaling to O'Brien that his connection with MAGA is a problem. But these voices were an isolated few. Most speakers throughout the convention argued that the coalition with O'Brien has helped build the union's power and that TDU is most effective when it focuses on organizing members around union and workplace issues rather than partisan politics. Those points won most of the applause. I don't like Trump either, said Tyler Kondo, a UPS driver and member of Local 455 in Colorado. I wish Sean O'Brien was taking a stronger stand against what the president is doing to workers and immigrants and immigrant workers and unions. But the majority of Teamsters I work with support Trump. I don't go to work every day looking for a reason to argue with them. Kondo, who is on the TDU steering committee, noted that there are many other organizations or campaigns to get involved in to protest Trump. Some TDU members, for instance, were active in the Teamsters Against Trump campaign last year. Our goal as TDU is to make action plans so we can mobilize Teamsters no matter who you support. That's how you win organizing drives and strikes and contract campaigns. A few days after the convention closed, the Local 92 Teamsters United slate, headed by young UPS part-timer and TDU member Damian Kungle, won an election to lead the 2,000-member local based in Canton, Ohio. We are ready to hit the ground running to involve every Local 92 member to stand up to employers and win strong contracts. And so that is really, right, that's the contention, right? Or that's the tension there. And obviously, TDU members spoke, and that's their right. And I don't have standing to tell Teamsters how they should vote in the upcoming Teamsters election. But I understand certainly feeling frustrated, and yeah. So what does it mean that TDU did this? Is this a betrayal of TDU's founding? Some people are making that argument. I'm not so sure. But I wonder if there are any other tensions that you wanted to bring out, Adam, that I haven't touched on yet.
Yeah, I mean, something I've heard from folks is like, why do an endorsement at all? Like, if you're very focused on the organizing aspect, is there a need to even endorse a candidate in this election, right? Sensing that there is some disagreement among the rank and file, particularly on politics. So I don't know. Maybe that's something they've considered and weighed. Maybe it was something they thought about, or maybe they didn't. I don't really know. Like you, I'm not a Teamster. I'm not going to say what the right choice was or was not. I can definitely understand arguments on different sides of this, and can agree with arguments on different sides of this, honestly. I mean, I can see logic behind all of it. But yeah, I think it is interesting. Did they weigh like a no endorsement? Did they fear that, doing that would result in backlash from the O'Brien administration? Because that's something else that I think we have to consider, is that, O'Brien does have a reputation. He's considered something of a bully himself, and I think that is something else that they had to factor in. Like, if we don't endorse, what do we lose by that? Now, you could argue that cozying up to bullies is not necessarily the long-term plan to defeat them, right? or to overcome that kind of behavior. So that's another thing to consider. But that was something that came to my mind, is like maybe there was some concern that if they had any break with O'Brien, it would cut out whatever influence they currently have. And they weighed the costs and benefits of that. I don't know. But like you said, I mean, there are reasons to be excited about what's happening in the Teamsters compared to years ago. There does seem to be more momentum with organizing campaigns. How much of it is like for show and versus real? I think you have to dig into the numbers on that. But yeah, it's interesting, and I'm really curious to know what other Teamsters think about it, and what kind of where they fall on this. And I don't think I'm terribly surprised TDU did this.
Right.
I guess I expected maybe it'd be a more divided vote, but I'm not particularly surprised.
Yeah, that was my assumption going in, is that TDU would endorse, but I also thought it would be a little bit closer, and that is what you said is probably going into their calculus was if we don't endorse, then we could get retaliation even for that from Sean O'Brien. And, in the short term, that is certainly, maybe a point in favor of endorsing, but it is in the long term, like, not healthy, right? It's not a democratic way to run a union, right? And even if the Teamsters, for a democratic union, their meat and potatoes has always been union issues, organizing campaigns, contract campaigns, workplace issues, right? It's also their meat and potatoes have been to build a democratic union, and it is not exactly small d democratic of the Teamsters to be so retaliatory in the way that they offer out positions within the union. Again, maybe it kind of works out. It kind of evens out in the long run, or in the short run, or whatever. And the TDU should endorse Sean O'Brien. But, I do think that part of the calculation is that if TDU did not endorse Sean O'Brien, they would be retaliated against. And that is not a democratic way to run a union. The democratic way to run a union is to hire the people and appoint people to positions of power that are the best for the job and that will build worker power in the best way, right? And so, it's not a good sign for the long-term life of democracy within the Teamsters that is almost certainly. Just to be clear, I don't have any inside information about what's going on with TDU, so this is not any inside baseball. This is just my assumption based on the way that Sean O'Brien acts, in public, and what we've seen him do to, the Rick Smith show. And we've talked about that before, but it's not. It is not something that is a secret that Sean O'Brien is a sort of vindictive leader and retaliatory in the way that he operates organizations under his control. So that's almost certainly was part of the calculus, right? So 844-899-TVLR, 844-899-8857. Dan, Union Gus asks or says that it would be interesting to see what Dan Labatz thinks about this. He was a co-founder of TDU. I didn't know he was still alive. Has he not written anything about this already?
I don't know. I haven't seen anything, but I'm not sure.
No, yeah, he was one of the people encouraging TDU to not endorse. So there was an open letter to TDU members that was released back in September that Dan Labatz was a signatory to. They say that they do talk about a few workplace issues that were problematic. They said that NDAs were used for the first time in UPS negotiations, threatening immediate removal from any bargaining committee for any reports to members. NDAs cynically make the bargaining committee constitutional amendment passed at the last convention virtually useless. They talk about the heavily publicized UPS agreements, not stopping AI or robotics, and being slow on the pickup of air-conditioned trucks. They talk about spending millions of dollars on public relations firms to sell contracts, and they talk about new member numbers and PR releases that don't reflect accurate growth or loss information. And so, if all that's true, then it complicates the picture of, is Sean O'Brien, even as he is being, buddy with Republican politicians, is he turning the union into like a more militant and worker and a more militant organization that is more dedicated to building worker power, right? That kind of complicates that picture. I'm not sure how much it complicates it because I was around when they were negotiating the UPS negotiations. And even though there was an NDA on the committee members, the union itself as an institution was giving pretty regular updates. And it seemed to me, and the thing that I heard from more people, was that it was a much more transparent process than in years back. So, the one about NDAs, I'm not too sure how important that is. I don't like the spending a bunch of money on public relations firms, and, the UPS agreement not protecting against AI or robotics or automation. I think the question is it better than what would have come in a Hoffa administration? And it seems to me that the answer is yes there, with respect to UPS at least. So anyway, they have this open letter calling for TDU to not endorse Sean O'Brien, saying that an endorsement of Sean O'Brien in this moment would signify approval of the above and much more. It would also mark the betrayal of TDU's founding principles. We urge the TDU membership to reject any Sean O'Brien endorsement. So at least some co-founders of TDU think that it's a betrayal of TDU's founding principles. So.
Interesting. And that was on Counterpunch, right?
Yeah. It was an open letter, so I think it was published in multiple places. But,
gotcha.
Yeah. But I did remember seeing that. ZennyTube said, yeah, IDK, how to feel about O'Brien, but I'm going to assume he's working in good faith. That would be...
Well, I don't even know that you have to assume that, frankly. You just have to assume that working with him is better than not. And that's
true.
Not even a calculation that requires good faith on his part.
Right.
Necessarily.
Right.
Yeah,
ultimately, what I was talking about in the beginning about, like, performative stuff and theatrical stuff versus material things. I think generally speaking, the material things are more important. It's more important that he increases strike pay than it is about who he takes pictures with, right? And so maybe he is like totally cynical and he could not care less about the nuts and bolts of making the Teamsters stronger, but he sees it as a way to increase his own personal profile, and that's all he cares about. But like if he cynically if he is cynically increasing worker power in the Teamsters, then it, the motivation with which that is done is like not all that important. It's not unimportant, and it's obviously more valuable, and it would be better to have a union partisan and a union ideologue, who is also an effective administrator. But, even I think you actually do really have to have the question, if you have a union partisan and ideologue who is an incompetent administrator versus a cynical union person who is good at building union power but doesn't actually care. I think that actually a materialist analysis would require you to vote for the cynical person, right, over the ideologue who's not good at his job. And so the question, I think, for me, it would be more about how good is he at his job of leading the Teamsters. So, and I think that's where the TDU came down on. That's where the TDU members, that was their biggest concern, and it seemed like they felt like he's doing a good job as a leader of the union. So there you go. 844-899-TVLR, 844-899-8857 if you would like to call in. Adam, there was an article in Jacobin about salting that you wanted to talk about a little bit. Talk to us. What's going on there?
Yeah, I won't spend too much time on it, but I just wanted to throw this article out there because I thought it was interesting and it was kind of a new take on something we've discussed on the show before. The article is "Salt the Earth" by Andrew Ahern, I believe is his name, and yeah, he's a freelance writer based in New England, but basically the premise of this article is that if you are a young person looking to fight climate change, you should consider a job in a strategic industry to try to organize new unions or revitalize old ones and advocate for green pro-labor policies. Because the fight for a livable future can't be won without organized labor. So, we've talked about salting on the show plenty of times. Salting is when you get a job with basically the express purpose to organize. You can go work at a non-union Starbucks, for example, right? Starbucks is a national campaign. There's been plenty of stores to organize, but there's plenty of stores that have not organized. So if you were interested in salting, I would say it's one of the most powerful things you could do to make a difference in this world and in this country and in this economy would be to go and organize. So it could be that you go and get a different job, with that express purpose. It could be that you go to a place that already has a union. A lot of times salting is thinking about new organizing and starting a new union. But we really need people who will go and get jobs in union places with the express intent of organizing and building power within that union. So this article, Salt the Earth in Jacobin, is talking about this from the perspective of climate change and how, if you remember back in 2019, there was a lot of climate protests. There was a lot of legislation happening around the world. Public consciousness on climate change was raised. And it seemed like, climate justice was getting some momentum, but then obviously we had the pandemic. A lot of in-person things ground to a halt. A lot of the protesting ground to a halt. And, there was a big focus on policy, trying to work within the Joe Biden administration to advance climate policy. But this is really thinking of, well, if we're gonna secure the massive policy changes that are required to effectively combat climate change, which we have to do, right? Like for the survival of our species, we need to do something about climate change, and it's going to take some pretty drastic measures. The only way we're going to have the power to do that is through a stronger labor movement that is better organized, more militant, and is really, playing a leading role in a coalition to win these better policies on the climate and environment. So that was something that he brings out in this article and really talks a little bit about what is salting, shows where it's been successful, how it has, not just in the Starbucks campaign, but also REI, Amazon, other campaigns owe some credit to salting. And so there's opportunities to go and salt in industries where it may have a strategic connection to climate. It may also be the opportunity to get in green energy jobs and turn those into good union jobs, right? Because just because a job is green, quote unquote, doesn't make it a good job necessarily. And so that is something that could be looked at. But also just getting involved in labor and pushing labor to be more involved on these issues. There's often a lot of tension between labor and the environment, particularly with the building trades, but also fossil fuel dependent unions, right? Who are looking at their short-term survival versus, long-term impacts of climate change. And so we do absolutely need more rank and file activists in this movement. I think if you are passionate about climate change, there's a lot of routes you can take for your activism. But I would say that what this article suggests in terms of getting a job in a strategic sector, getting involved in the labor movement and bringing your passion for the climate and for the environment into the labor movement is a really good idea. And I would caution you to know that you're going to face some obstacles, and you're going to learn some of the ins and outs of union democracy, and some places where it's better than others. But absolutely, it's an opportunity to have conversations with regular working people, your coworkers. It's an opportunity to influence these institutions that you and your coworkers run together, and in the big picture, leverage these institutions to secure broader social change. So I thought that was really interesting. It was, not something I had really seen a whole lot of, talking about salting in the context of the climate crisis. But I'm all for more salting. I think anyone listening, if you have the ability to organize in your workplace, you should. If you don't, for whatever reason, you should consider, can you find a job in a workplace that can be organized, or can you find a job that is already organized and get involved in a union, even if it's a sleepy union? Maybe that's your opportunity to build something and make something stronger and better. So yeah, I didn't have a whole lot more to say on it beyond that. I just thought it was interesting. And I wanted to lift that up for folks. If climate change is your passion, absolutely, there's a place for you in the labor movement, and we need your passion here in this movement.
We're at 12:15. Do you want to go ahead and wrap, or do you want to get to something else? We got that Bernie speech from the Eugene Debs Award dinner, but it's about 25 minutes long, so we'd go significantly over if we played it. Do you want to do something else? Or we've got, there were a couple of things that you mentioned about Mexico, but I haven't done too much reading about that. I don't know. What do you think, Adam?
Well, all I have really left is a couple of plugs to leave people with. So
okay,
that's up to you. But I can definitely share a couple of plugs I wanted to lift up for folks. As always, I encourage people to follow Labor Notes, see what Labor Notes is providing in terms of training. They have the New Orleans Troublemakers School. It's coming up Saturday, December 6th. I believe that is a week from today?
Yep.
So that's really exciting. You'll be able to join labor activists from around New Orleans and across the South to strategize, share skills, and learn how to organize to win. Troublemaker schools are day-long mini-conferences that cover organizing skills and highlight real-world examples of taking on the boss and winning. So again, that's Saturday, December 6th. It'll be 9:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the IATSE Local 478 Hall in New Orleans. There is a registration fee, but if you need help getting in, they're always willing to work with you. And I would also want to recommend this upcoming online training. It's going to be December 1st, so just coming up real soon. Winning a Strong Contract. So this is a two-part workshop. Part 1 will be December 1st. Part 2 will be on December 8th, and it's how to build a successful contract campaign and harness the power of the rank and file membership to win the strongest possible contract. Right? So it's about the campaign around the contract more so than the nitty gritty of negotiating at the table. So that's going to be, again, December 1st at 6 p.m. Central. And then they have another online training, Workers Organized to Resist ICE. And that's going to be December 17th at 7 p.m. And it's going to talk a little bit about how working people can organize to resist the oppression that so many of our communities are facing from this agency. And I guess my last plug is that on, I believe is going to be on a Wednesday on December 10th at noon. I will be holding a virtual briefing on the Alabama Arise Worker Power campaign. You can go to alarise.org to see more there and to follow that. So that'll be December 10th on a Wednesday at noon. And I believe those are all of the plugs I had. But just a reminder that Means TV, we are excited to be on Means TV. We do have a discount code, TVLR. I believe they're actually running a pretty significant sale right now for Black Friday, though. If you're not already plugged into Means TV, I really highly encourage it. They've got some new documentaries out, some new content, lots of good stuff in the works. So, you know, Giving Tuesday is coming up. There's going to be a lot of people asking for money, but I do believe that if you can chip in a few bucks to support worker media, that's really, really important, because there's so much corporate propaganda. There's so much reactionary right-wing propaganda that we need working people media. So that's why I'm happy to pay to Means TV. It's why I'm happy to be a subscriber to the Real News Network and Labor Notes and In These Times and other good publications, whether it's magazines, websites, multimedia, whatever. There are some good media folks out there, and there are folks who are trying to put out good information, good analysis, information and analysis that really uplifts working people and our ability to come together and organize for positive change. And so, yeah, I just want to encourage folks to think about that. What kind of media can you support? What kind of media would you like to see? Obviously, we'd love it if you chipped in a few bucks to the Valley Labor Report to keep us on the air at TVLR.fm. But, whoever you're supporting, just make sure you do your part. I try to do my part, because we know that if we want progressive, worker-centered media, it's not going to come from the corporations and the big sponsors. We're going to have to kind of build it ourselves and help each other in this process.
We do have one more comment that I wanted to read from Matthias13. Why wouldn't TDU endorse the coalition that includes TDU leaders on the slate of IBT leaders with Sean and Fred? This is not because of a threat of retaliation, but good faith coalition building. That's a fair enough comment. That it's not like they just endorsed Sean O'Brien. They endorsed the full Oz slate, which does include several TDU members. And I'm not saying, Matthias, and I hope it didn't come across this way, that the entire reason is because of a threat of retaliation. I just said that I think that probably played into the calculus. But also, you're right that you do have to engage in coalition building. And for folks on the militant unionist side, that does mean, building coalition with people who aren't exactly the same as you in your union politics, right? And so...
That's true.
So,
that is the nature of coalition work,
yeah.
right? And we understand that very well in Alabama. I know that my politics are to the left of most every person I encounter in Alabama. That's just the nature of it. I don't think it'll always be that way, obviously, but that's part of why I do what I do, right? But by nature of working in Alabama, you have to understand coalitions, or at least working as a progressive or left-wing kind of person in the South. You have to understand coalitions. You have to be able to work with people who are different from you and kind of set those boundaries and understand, like, what's non-negotiable. Where can you agree to disagree? Where can you work together, but maybe, avoid each other on other instances, that kind of thing. It's really tough. It's tough to have those kind of conversations, but ultimately, are you winning for working people? And I'm willing to work with people who are liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republican, socialist, anything in between, if we can work together to make life better for workers, for the everyday people, for poor and working class folks. And sometimes that means you make tough decisions. And sometimes there is no easy answer or, easily defined right answer. It's a lot of picking and choosing your battles, and also just, trying to find the areas where you can work with people and make some progress and move the ball down the field. Even when you don't necessarily always agree with those people.
Yep. Free American says, everyone cannot be a Marxist. I don't know if everyone cannot be a Marxist, but the reality is everyone is not a Marxist, nor will they be for some time. So you must work with people you disagree with. That is for sure. Mark asks, when are you going to bring NALC members on to talk about the upcoming contract? The previous one took 700 days to finish. NALC members are always welcome to call in to give us their thoughts on the negotiations. 844-899-TVLR is the phone number. You can leave a voicemail at any time, and we might respond to it on the next program. But typically we don't, feature stories until there's like some sort of relevant thing. So maybe there's I know the NALC just started preparations for negotiations. I don't believe they've started negotiations. Mark, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But maybe the start of negotiations is a good time to have somebody on. And I imagine, I'm sure we will at some point. I don't know when, but the start of negotiation sounds like a good time to have. To try to have somebody on. NALC begin negotiations. Let's see. Have they? Maybe because I remember seeing something about it, but I didn't think that they had started already. Yeah. Let's see. They are scheduled to begin in February of 2026, according to the NALC. Back in October, they said that the NALC Executive Council met at the headquarters in Washington, D.C. to continue preparations for the next round of collective bargaining. Negotiations with the Postal Service will officially begin in February 2026, with the current national agreement set to expire on May 22nd, 2026. So, February, Mark, sounds like a good answer to that question. If you have any recommendations for a guest, feel free to let me know. Leave a voicemail or send us a note at tvlr.fm/contact. All right, that's going to be it for us today, folks. Appreciate everybody tuning in. tvlr.fm/donate if you'd like to support the program. tvlr.fm to subscribe to our or to donate to subscribe to our newsletters. tvlr.fm. tvlr.fm/contact to leave us a note. Appreciate everybody tuning in. We'll see you next week.